What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9, coming back with another Star Wars Unlimited video here. And we have myself running Vader with the Energy Conversion Lab, so Command Vader, kind of a classic build, playing against Chewie. So Chewie is a hero who deploys on 7 resources, and as an action, you can play a unit that costs 3 or less from your hand. You have to pay its cost as normal, but it gains Sentinel. And my opponent is running the standard Command Center base, the Death Star Command Center, their 30 life base. And so we're going to see how this one goes. We got 3 games for you today here, I think. So we're rolling off to see who will get to go first, and I am victorious in the roll-off. And this is a pretty good starting hand. So looking at this, I have a solid turn 1 play with the First Legion Snowtrooper. I have a resupply, which will help me ramp. So the theory with this deck is that you want to use resupply and Super Laser Technician to ramp into playing Darth Vader early. Darth Vader is probably the strongest combat hero in the game right now, but suffers from deploying at 7 resources, which is as late as any hero. In fact, Chewie is the only other 7 resource deployment in the game. So I lead off with the First Legion Snowtrooper, 2 cost 2/3. When attacking a damaged unit, gets +2/+0 and gains Overwhelm. My opponent plays a Restored Arc, a classic Rebel unit there, 2 cost 2/3 with Restore 1 in the Space Arena. So looking at this, I don't really have a good play against my opponent's Restored Arc this turn, and I already have the Ground Arena right now, so I'm thinking what I'm going to do is I'm going to resource that Cell Block Guard and just play the Resupply this turn, try to ramp up and get things going quicker. I do swing with the First Legion Snowtrooper. My opponent hits me with the Restored Arc and repairs one of the damage that I just did with Restore. Arguably, I should have played the Resupply first, within the hopes that my opponent would attack into my base before I attacked, and therefore the Restore would not heal him. But ended up doing it in this order. I think I was maybe worried he was going to play a Sentinel or something. And my opponent then plays Consortium Star Viper, 3 cost 3/3. While you have the initiative, this unit gains Restore 2. So interesting unit there. And we'll see what happens here. My opponent obviously going hard into the Space Arena right now. I have an Open Fire, and I have a First Legion I'm sorry, a Death Star Stormtrooper. I could also play the Snowtrooper Lieutenant that I have in hand. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use Open Fire to clear the Consortium Star Viper, removing his stronger unit. So 4 damage to a unit, just it's pretty standard removal. And then I can play my Snowtrooper Lieutenant to send in the First Legion Snowtrooper for 4 total damage, also developing my force in the Ground Arena a bit. So 4 damage to the enemy base, but you know the restore on that Restored Arc has been causing some trouble. My opponent plays Bright Hope, which is a 4 cost 2/6 with Sentinel. And when played, you may return a friendly non-leader ground unit to its owner's hand. If you do draw a card, he doesn't have anything in the ground arena, so it actually doesn't do anything. Um, and at least with that side of the ability, but he does now have a 2/6 Sentinel in the Space Arena. And so I've been chipping away at the base, but I'm below him on life total, in part because I started lower. I see that I have an overwhelming barrage in hand, though. What I'm gonna try to do this turn is get the I'm gonna try to get some damage on the enemy base, then play out my ATST. I'm hoping that he doesn't have a Vanquish to clear the ATST, and then next turn I can potentially overwhelming barrage off the ATST or Vader. ATST is strength 6, and so overwhelming barrage on that ATST for 8 damage could kill the Restored Arc and deal a bunch of damage. My opponent actually plays Wedge, 5 cost 5/5. Each friendly vehicle unit gets +1/+1 and gains Ambush. So kind of a problem because that's buffing the so Wedge is a 5/5 character and is buffing the space units, but I can attack with the ATST, clear out Wedge here, do a damage to the base with Overwhelm as well, and still potentially be in position for the overwhelming barrage on the other units. I can also bring Darth Vader onto the board this turn, a turn ahead of my opponent playing Chewie. Um, my opponent deploys Colonel Yularen, using Chewie's ability to give Colonel Yularen Sentinel. I can then bring in Agent Callus instead of going for the barrage. Callus is a 4/4 with ambush, and when another unique unit is defeated, you may draw a card. That's a once per round ability, but because Yularen is a unique unit, Callus can defeat him, draw me a card, and remain in play since he's 4/4 and only took 2 damage. I'm going to be able to. So I actually try to do an illegal play here. So I try to use Vader on my opponent's restored arc, but then I realize I actually can't do it because even though Agent Callus is an Imperial, he's not villainous, and you need to have the villainous trait to use Vader's hero side or leader side ability. So I end up just deploying Vader there instead. My hope was that I could ping the restored arc for 1 and then kill it with Vader's on attack ability, but I'm not going to be able to do that. So instead, I have put Vader on the field and I'm going to attack the base with Vader, do 2 damage to the restored arc, which will leave it alive, at least for now. And then I still have 2 more units that can swing into the enemy base. So I have seemingly gained a substantial advantage at this point. Um, However, my opponent deploys Admiral Akbar, dealing a damage to my ATST. I have the Snowtrooper Lieutenant hit Admiral Akbar for 2. So Akbar is 3 for a 1/4 with Restore 1. When played, you may deal damage to a unit equal to the number of units you control in that arena. So damage I damage Admiral Akbar and then also hit him with the Snowtrooper, with the First Legion Snowtrooper, who then deals 2 damage to the base with Overwhelm, because while attacking a damaged unit, this unit gains +2/+0 and Overwhelm. So I end up clearing the ground arena again, doing significant damage to the base. And my base is lower life, and my opponent does have the advantage in space, but my ground force is very intimidating at this point. My opponent deploys Chewie. For some reason, that Chewie card was just like appearing smaller than normal in this game. I'm not sure why. I deploy Veers, 3 cost 3/3. Other friendly Imperial units get +1/+1. So now my opponent plays Tarkin again, or I'm sorry, not Tarkin. My opponent plays Admiral Akbar again, clearing the ATST there. Um, and I'm thinking about what my best options here are. Chewie is a Sentinel, so I will have to attack him. I have the overwhelming barrage still available. So one thing I can do is just throw a bad unit into Chewie and then try to clear him with the overwhelming barrage. The problem is Chewie has grit, so he gets +1 attack for each damage on him. Um, I can use the overwhelming barrage to clear non-Chewie units though also. So I use overwhelming barrage on Vader, which is going to be 8 total damage. And I'm going to actually use it to clear out the space arena. So that's 7 damage used to clear out the space arena, and then 1 on Admiral Akbar as well. And that's going to be putting Admiral Akbar into a position where I can potentially hit him with the First Legion Snowtrooper. Chewie attacks my base for 2. My opponent, I think, is trying to get that last bit of damage through. But now buffed with the Overwhelming Barrage, Vader can attack Chewie and kill him by using his ability to damage Chewie for 2. Then the actual hit from the attack will defeat Chewie. However, Vader does take 4 damage from that because the on-attack ability is resolved before the attack, which also means that there will be increased strength there from Chewie's grit. A wing leader deploys, buffing up. A wing leader deploys, buffing up the Admiral Akbar there. And so in this situation, I could kill Admiral Akbar with the with the First Legion Snowtrooper, but I opt to kill him with Callus instead. That is going to cause me to draw a card. And additionally, I have another copy of Callus in hand, and since Callus is unique, having the one that's already on the board cleared out allows me to potentially surprise my opponent with the other one. I then continue to push more damage to the base with my ground units here. My opponent does have a wing leader on the board. And we're going to see what happens here, but I feel like I have a big advantage at this point in this game with I have a card advantage and I have a much stronger force in the ground arena. My opponent plays home one, which is actually a lot of value, but the problem is I think I have lethal on the ground. So home one is a 7/7 with restore 2. It gives every other friendly unit restore 1, and when it's played, you may play a heroic unit from your discard pile and it costs 3 less. So he's searching to see what he can get for good value from the discard pile. Ends up getting a restored arc there. Um, but at this point, I have lethal in the ground arena. I attack with Vader, do some damage to the base, use the on attack ability to clear the wing leader, and my opponent doesn't really have other options. So my opponent takes the initiative and my remaining ground units clear the base. So I did get the win in that game. This is a really interesting build that my opponent's using, I think. So this is a Chewie. It is a Chewie command build that looks to be focused on trying to win in the space arena while using Chewie's ability and defensive traits to stall the ground arena. And I actually think that's a pretty cool plan. It didn't work in this game. I was able to I was able to get enough of a force in the ground arena and reset the space arena with the overwhelming barrage and so on. But I think it's an interesting game plan for sure. And so we're gonna do a rematch here. We end up doing 3 games this time, and let's see how this rematch goes. All right. So I actually mulligan into a hand where all I can do as an opening play is play a Snowtrooper Lieutenant, which is not nothing, but is still not very good. My opponent has the initiative this turn. Um, Spends 2 resources to play Colonel Yularen. So Yularen is a 2-cost 2/3. When you play a command unit, you may heal 1 damage from your base. So in this situation, I could play the Snowtrooper Lieutenant, but I actually opt to just take the initiative instead. And the reason that I did that is that um, the Snowtrooper Lieutenant trades unfavorably with Yularen. Yularen can just attack and kill him and stay alive. And as a result of that, I would rather not have it. I would rather just like not give him that opportunity, just take the initiative. Maybe I'll get a value with it later. Um, so my opponent hits the base for 2 with that Yularen and deploys the same unit that was shown in that earlier game that I took out with the open fire, the Consortium Star Viper, a 3/3 with restore 2, but only while you have the initiative. Otherwise, it's just a 3/3. I have an interesting resource decision. So I have a copy of Relentless here. Relentless is an incredibly good unit, but it only comes out at 9 resources. So I'm thinking in this case, I end up thinking, maybe I should resource that. I don't know that it's going to be relevant fast enough. I play out an Emperor's Royal Guard, which trades favorably against that Yularen. My opponent continues to push damage to the base there. Yularen hitting my base for 2. I'm going to bring out the First Legion Snowtrooper and try to kind of wrest control of the ground arena there. But my opponent still has at least 3 damage coming my way. Yep, there's that 3 damage with the Consortium Star Viper hitting my base for 3. And then still has 4 resources. So I am feeling considerably behind, though I do have the benefit of having ramped up a bit. And so there is bright hope yet again. Not a super exciting play here, honestly. I think it's best as a defender against a bunch of small space units. Since I am not sending units to space right here, I'm in a position where it's just going to be 2 damage per turn, similar to some of the smaller ships. Um, I guess it's a little harder to remove. One interesting note about this is that the deck that I'm currently playing doesn't actually have anything in the space arena other than So I cut the basic tie LN and I'm running I do have the tie inter I think I have three tie interceptors and two relentless, and that's all I got in the space arena with this build. I'm really focused on the ground arena instead and on ramping up, and my hope is that maybe I can destroy space arena units with removal. So I send the first Legion Snowtrooper in to defeat Colonel Yularen using my Snowtrooper Lieutenant. You may attack with the unit if it's an Imperial unit, gets +2/+0. My opponent then plays Wedge. I do not want to see that. I ping the Consortium Star Viper for 1, also inflicting 1 damage to the enemy base, the first damage I've inflicted all game. I get hit by the Consortium Star Viper for 4 because Wedge gives it +1/+1. However, I have a resupply in hand, which is a really big benefit here. So resupply just becomes a resource. It's an exhausted resource, but an exhausted resource still means that I get to deploy Darth Vader this turn. And even though I'm down to just 10 life, Darth Vader can now attack, defeat Wedge, and use his on-attack ability to deal 2 damage to the Consortium Star Viper and remove that as well. Then I hit the enemy base with my Emperor's Royal Guard there. And so now I'm in a position where I have 2 copies of Overwhelming Barrage, and I'm hoping I'm going to be able to use those with Vader to destroy whatever my opponent sends to the board. My opponent actually plays a resupply on my Vader. Or I'm sorry, not a resupply, an entrenched on my Vader, which prevents him from attacking the base. It also gives him +3/+3. So there's an upside to it for me, but mainly it's going to prevent me from attacking that base and doing a bunch of damage. Um, my current plan is I am going to try to get him to play other units before I use Overwhelming Barrage to try to get a 2-for-1 or even a 3-for-1. So I'm attacking with my ground units first to kind of try and bait out more plays from my opponent. My opponent bring out an Alliance X-wing and then decides to um, decides to take the initiative. I have another Emperor's Royal Guard, and then the barrage with Vader actually at strength 10 because he has the +3 from the entrenched as well as the +2 from the barrage, and 10 damage is enough to wipe out the 9 hit points of space units my opponent has on the board. I still have another overwhelming barrage, and I have a relentless as well. So my hope is that by playing this relentless, I'm going to be able to kind of cement control of the space arena. A basic rebel basic rebel unit there deploys. I play the Relentless, 9 cost 8/8. First event played by an opponent each round loses all abilities. My opponent brings out Chewie, who I can actually kill in one hit with Vader because he can use 2 damage to Chewie from the ability and then hit him up for 8 with his main attack, thanks to the buff from Entrenched. I erroneously think this is going to kill Vader. It actually doesn't kill him. It does 4 damage because once again I've done 2 damage before the combat with that on attack, which means that Chewie does extra damage with grit, but the extra hit points from Entrenched keep me alive, only for my opponent to play Tarkin to clear out my Vader. I'm overall probably fine with that. Vader defeated Wedge, defeated Chewie, and defeated the Consortium Star Viper, provided a base for the overwhelming barrage that wiped the enemy space arena, and then also had things set up such that my opponent needed to use Akbar to kill him. I hit Akbar with the Snowtrooper Lieutenant and then with the First Legion Snowtrooper to do some overrun damage. I have 2 Emperor's Royal Guards here, and I'm going to send one of them to defeat the Rebel Pathfinder, clearing out the enemy board, and then one of them into the enemy base. And now I'm in a very commanding position as I have a superior force in the ground arena and space arena with my opponent not having any units on the board. I have many more resources than my opponent, thanks to my ramping from earlier, and I have really strong removal options in hand, and my opponent's first event is blanked thanks to the relentless, so there's really not a lot he can do. I also have lethal this turn. Pretty unfavorable looking situation for my opponent. And my opponent plays an Agent Callus who does clear off one of my Emperor's Royal Guards. However, Emperor's Royal Guard is non-unique, so that does not actually get a kill. I have Relentless swing into the enemy base. I think that I think this is a going to be a tough one here. Um, my opponent plays a Rugged Survivors, which does have Sentinel because they have at least 6 resources to activate that ability. Relentless fires off an overwhelming barrage, clears the ground arena completely, and my remaining 2 units go in for the win. So that game I had double ramp with Vader hitting 2 copies of what was it? It was 2 copies of resupply to deploy 2 turns early. So that was a substantial advantage relative to the that was a substantial advantage relative to normal Vader and Chewie timing. And we're gonna go into a game 3. Interesting. Also, I was able to make a fairly solid comeback there, where my opening was quite bad with it. With I ended up not playing a unit on the first turn because the only unit that I could play was easily countered by him. And going for other stuff. It's possible now that I think about it that I actually should have played the Snowtrooper Lieutenant and let him attack it and kill it because that would have left Yularen on 1 HP and I could then potentially remove him with Vader's King ability sometime later. That might well have been better than not playing him. On the other hand, I think I did end up resourcing that, or did I resource that or play it? I think I either resourced it or played it, so it wasn't as if it was just sticking in my hand all the time. So possible that was good play. Anyway, game 3, Alliance X-Wing, 2 cost 2/3 vanilla space unit. I play the Seasoned Sharptrooper, which has really cool art in my opinion. 2 cost 2/3, and it gets +2 power if you have 6 or more resources, which of course I don't. But for now, a 2/3 will allow me to at least push some damage through in the ground arena. My opponent sends in the Rugged Survivors. 3 cost 3/4, and they will get Sentinel once my opponent has 6 resources, but those 6 resources are not currently in position. I am gonna just bring out a Super Laser Technician. My opponent's X-Wing strafes my base there. 2 damage to the base. I decide I'm just gonna take the initiative rather than swing for 2. My opponent's Chewie there had, I believe, made the Homestead Militia a Sentinel, which means that I wouldn't have been able to swing for 2 on the base. I could have hit the Homestead Militia for 2, but whatever. That doesn't seem exceptionally valuable to me. Now I do have some Imperial Interceptors in hand, which are very solid cards for this matchup because an Imperial Interceptor is a 3/2 fighter, and when you play it, it deals 3 damage to a unit in the space arena. So I lead off by having my Super Laser Technician just attack into the militia there. And the Super Laser Technician is defeated but does 2 damage and becomes a resource. My opponent uses the militia to defeat my Seasoned Shore Trooper. I play the Imperial Interceptor and deal 3 damage to that X-Wing, defeating it in immediately without it having a chance to attack. My opponent uses Chewie's ability to deploy another copy of the Homestead Militia, this time with Sentinel again. I use Vader's ability to ping 1 damage onto that militia and 1 damage to the enemy base. So now, in kind of a reversal of the previous games, my opponent is the one with the advantage on the ground, but with me in the advantage in space as we move towards leaders deploying, or at least my leader deploying. I am going to be able to deploy Vader this turn in all likelihood, which is going to be pretty sweet for me, I think. So I use the Energy Conversion Lab, play a unit that costs 6 or less from your hand, it gains ambush for this phase. That's going to be the Super Laser Technician who attacks into the Homestead Militia, is defeated, and provides itself as a resource for my base. My opponent then plays a Wing Leader and puts 2 +1/+1 counters on the Arc 170 there, the restored Arc 170. And I believe did use Chewie's ability to give that Wing Leader. I believe used Chewie's ability to give that Wing Leader Sentinel as well. I'm going to ping the Homestead Militia and remove it using Vader's ability. I then deploy Vader I deploy a Death Star Stormtrooper. My opponent has taken the initiative. I'll use Vader to hit the enemy base for 5 and use his on attack 2 damage to defeat that wing leader, which then frees up my interceptor to hit the enemy base for 3 rather than having to attack into the Sentinel and trade. So right now I have an overall board advantage. My opponent's experienced restored arc is superior to my TIE interceptor, but I'm fine with just having that TIE interceptor and the restored arc attack past each other. And if my opponent attacks to clear the TIE interceptor, I can play a second interceptor to remove the arc. Um, let's see what happens in this turn. My ideal is that I want to play. My ideal is that I do want to play the Imperial Interceptor and then the Seasoned Shore Trooper as well. I attack. My opponent plays Yoda, giving him Sentinel with the Chewbacca ability. I defeat Yoda with Vader and deal 2 damage to the restored arc. My opponent opts to attack my base rather than trading with the Interceptor. It would now be a trade. I then deploy. I then deploy the Imperial Interceptor, the second copy from my hand, deal 3 damage to the restored arc and clear it. So now I have an advantage in space and on the ground. My opponent plays an Alliance X-Wing to try and kind of contest that arena, and I decide I'm going to trade my Ready Interceptor for the X-Wing in order to get into a position where my opponent once again does not have units on the board. I am then going to bring out that seasoned short trooper, highlighting the cool art there for a moment, and then we're going to get to the next turn. This turn, I should be able to play Relentless, and that is hopefully going to close up the game for me. I think it's going to be difficult for the opponent to come back from that. Well, there is Relentless. My opponent has played a Yoda with Sentinel and a Rebel Pathfinder. My seasoned shore trooper defeats Yoda, thanks to myself. Because I have 6 or more resources, this unit has +2 power and is actually a 4/3 for 2. Lots of value there. My opponent does deploy Chewie now, bringing out another Sentinel. Chewie is going to be a little annoying for me to deal with, I think, but at this point, with the Relentless and Interceptor in the space arena, I can, in theory, get the advantage there, and I don't have to worry so much. I have the Death Star Stormtrooper attack into Chewie and die, putting 3 damage on Chewie. And Chewie with Sentinel and Grit can be quite annoying. Gets +1/+0 for each damage on it, and my units have to attack him if able. Chewie hits my base for 5 damage. Vader can attack into Chewie here and trade with him if I use the ability for the extra 2 damage there. And I end up deciding, you know what, that's worth it. So Vader for Chewie ends up being a trade. And then let's see what else is going on here. "15 life to 14 life." I have a much stronger board. My opponent can at least trade that Rebel Pathfinder with my seasoned shore trooper. Ends up bringing out another Consortium Star Viper instead. I clear it with with another Imperial Interceptor. I probably should have. I don't think that was a good play. I think I should have just attacked the base with the seasoned shore trooper there and pushed more damage through. My opponent uses a takedown to clear my Imperial Interceptor, and I remove it at first, but then I'm like, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't work because Relentless blocks the first event you play. I attack into the base for 4. My opponent attacks into the base for 2, and then Relentless and the Imperial Interceptor there have exactly 11 more to close out the game. So these were some pretty successful games for my Vader Command build. I think Vader Command is very strong. Interestingly, it's one of the starter decks, and you can kind of build on that and create a build that I think is quite powerful. But I think this build my opponent was using with the Chewbacca space focus and then trying to like use Chewie's Sentinel ability and similar to disrupt their ground arena. I actually think it's like quite an interesting game plan and could prove really strong. Maybe it needs a few more cards, or maybe this is just a bad matchup. But I thought that was a cool and innovative deck, and I've actually been looking at making kind of my own version of this build, which might feature in future videos. So while it was a strong victory for Vader, I think there is some merit to this Chewie build. In the post game discussion, my opponent said that he did actually have resupply himself and just didn't see it. So while I do have both resupply and super laser technician, it seems like I also had some good luck with respect to seeing my ramp. Um, so interesting situation, and I'm going to maybe play around with this Chewbacca archetype a bit myself and see what I can do with it. I think it's a cool idea for a deck. All right, so that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thanks to you all for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I have videos here as well as some written content over at the Fifth Trooper blog, which you can find that over at fifthtrooper.com, or I'm sorry, thefifthtrooper.com there. And I'm going to be blogging at least monthly with some Star Wars Unlimited content there. Also, if you're a Star Wars Legion or Star Wars Shatterpoint fan, you can find some stuff there as well. All right, guys, thanks again for checking out the video, and I will catch you guys later.